The galaxy had long been at peace, at least for the powerful Xerians. They were a race of mighty beings, their empire stretching across countless stars. Every world they encountered fell under their control. Their technology was unmatched, their military strength superior. No species had ever dared to challenge them. But there was one world they never expected to conquer: Earth. The Xerians had heard rumors of the humans, primitive, weak, and scattered across their tiny planet. Yet they saw Earth as a small, insignificant rock, its people too disorganized to pose a threat. So they decided to end the human race. With a swift strike, they launched an invasion, sending their fleet to Earth without hesitation. They would wipe out humanity and claim Earth's resources for their own. But the Xerians made a grave mistake. They underestimated humanity. The first attacks came without warning. Earth's cities were bombarded, its people unprepared for the full might of the Xerian fleet. The human military, though brave, was outmatched. In the face of such overwhelming power, humanity's defenses crumbled. Millions of people died, and the rest were forced to flee into hiding. Yet, as the bombs fell and the cities burned, something inside humanity began to stir. Something old, something forgotten. In a secret underground base deep in the mountains of North America, Dr. Emily Hayes, a scientist who had long suspected that humanity's true potential was much greater than anyone realized, discovered a hidden program buried in the archives. The program was old, hidden from the world's governments for centuries. It was a remnant from an ancient time, long before the current wars. Humanity's ancestors had known that, should the Earth ever be threatened by a greater force, they needed to awaken a power buried deep within their species. It was a weapon of war, a secret designed to make humanity a force like no other. But the program was never activated, forgotten by all but a few. Dr. Hayes was one of those few. With the Earth under attack, she made a decision that would change the fate of humanity forever. She activated the program. The secret power, buried beneath layers of code and hidden away for centuries, began to come alive. At first, there was nothing. The world's leaders were focused on the battle at hand, too distracted to notice. The Xerians continued their bombardment, confident in their victory. But soon, the tides began to shift. The first sign came when a small human strike force launched a daring mission to sabotage a key Xerian command center. It was a suicide mission, but against all odds, they succeeded. The Xerians were stunned. How could these weak humans have pulled off such a feat? It didn't stop there. Soon after, the human resistance groups, once scattered and disorganized, began to communicate with each other. They shared resources, weapons, and knowledge. Dr. Hayes, using the power of the awakened program, guided them, using data from ancient military archives to teach them how to fight not just with weapons, but with strategy, ingenuity, and the sheer will to survive. Humanity was learning, adapting, and evolving. The Xerians began to realize that these humans, whom they had once seen as nothing more than primitive, weak creatures, were starting to present a problem. A very dangerous problem. Dr. Hayes was not the only one aware of the ancient weapon. There were others. Survivors who had uncovered similar fragments of human history. Pieces of forgotten technology that had been passed down through the ages. They too joined the fight, each bringing their knowledge and skills. The resistance grew stronger, bolder, and more unified. The Xerians, who had once thought they were invincible, now found themselves on the defensive. They had underestimated humanity, and it was a mistake they would soon regret. But the Xerians were not going to surrender easily. They began to deploy their most devastating weapons, bombing Earth with even more force, trying to break the spirit of humanity. But something changed within the humans. They began to fight back, not just to survive, but to prove a point. They would not go down without a fight. On the outskirts of a ruined city, A young soldier named Alex, part of a new resistance unit, stood staring at the sky. He had seen the devastation, lost friends in the battles, and watched entire cities fall. But his anger was now the fuel that powered him. He wasn't fighting just for survival, he was fighting for something bigger. He was fighting for humanity's right to exist. It was in moments like these that humanity's true power began to show. The resistance, though small at first, became something more. They started to strike back. First, it was small victories. A downed Xerian scout ship, a destroyed communications relay. And then, the unthinkable happened. A full-fledged human assault on a Xerian battleship. The ship was far superior in firepower, but the humans didn't back down. They fought with everything they had, using tactics the Xerians hadn't expected. The battle was brutal. The ship was large, its weapons terrifying, but the humans found a way. They used every scrap of knowledge, every piece of technology, every bit of ingenuity that humanity had ever created. They didn't just fight, they fought smart. They used the Xerians' overconfidence against them. In the end, they succeeded. The Xerian ship was destroyed. It was a turning point. The humans had awakened something they didn't even know they had. The fire of resistance, the strength of survival, and the unbreakable will to fight for what was right. Dr. Hayes watched. As the news spread, humanity was no longer weak. They had become something far more dangerous. The first victory was a shock to everyone, including humanity itself. After the destruction of the Xerian battleship, the resistance became more than just a group of survivors fighting to stay alive. They had a purpose now, a burning desire. To protect their home, to prove to the galaxy that humanity could not be erased so easily. Dr. Emily Hayes watched as the first human victory spread across the globe. News channels once filled with reports of despair and loss now reported signs of resistance, small victories against the alien invaders. It was a glimmer of hope, something that had been missing since the Xerians had launched their initial attacks. But hope alone was not enough to defeat an empire. In hidden underground bunkers and secret bases, human resistance leaders began to form a strategy. The attacks on Xerian forces had been successful, but the Xerians were not about to give up. They had the power, they had the ships, and they had the numbers. But humanity had something they did not: determination. The people of Earth, once divided by nations and borders, now stood united. For the first time, humanity wasn't just fighting for survival, it was fighting for its right to exist. The survivors, once scattered and afraid, now joined forces. The humans had learned quickly, using the ancient knowledge Dr. Hayes had uncovered, to organize themselves. They were no longer just civilians. They were soldiers, engineers, and scientists, all working toward one goal: to drive the Xerians from their home. One by one, the resistance groups began to strike back. Small, tactical operations turned into larger assaults, each victory built on the last, growing stronger, more confident. Humans who had once been afraid of the Xerians now felt the power of their own strength. They had fought back against impossible odds and won. It wasn't just a win for the battle, it was a win for humanity itself. On the ground, the cities were still in ruins. But where once there was fear, there was now something else: resolve. In the streets of New York, a group of survivors gathered to plan their next attack. Their leader, Alex, the young soldier who had led the assault on the Xerian battleship, stood before them. His face was dirtied with the ash of fallen cities, but his eyes burned with determination. "Listen up," Alex said, his voice steady. "The Xerians may have their weapons, but we have something they don't. We have each other, we have our minds, and we have a reason to fight." The group nodded, their faces hardening with the same resolve. Alex continued. "We've learned how they think. We know their tactics. We've seen what works. Now it's time to hit them where it hurts." He pulled up a hologram of the Xerian. fleet showing their positions in orbit around Earth. This is their command ship. It's heavily guarded, but it's the heart of their operation. We take that down, and we cripple their entire army. A murmur ran through the group. They knew what this meant. It was a dangerous mission, but they were ready. We've fought for our lives. Now, we're going to fight for our future, Alex added. Back in the command center, Dr. Hayes and the other resistance leaders worked around the clock. They had learned from their previous encounters with the Xerians and were using that knowledge to develop new weapons. Humans, with their inventive minds, had found ways to turn the Xerians' own technology against them. The resistance developed new types of shields, adapted weapons from the wreckage of destroyed Xerian ships, and created powerful new energy sources. Humanity's ingenuity was their greatest weapon. As the days passed, the resistance grew bolder. They were no longer just fighting to survive, they were fighting to win. At the same time, the Xerians realized that something had changed. The human resistance wasn't falling apart like they had expected. If anything, it was growing stronger. The Xerians had underestimated the humans before, and now they were paying the price. In the command center of the Xerian fleet, General Voreth, the leader of the Xerian military, paced back and forth. His alien eyes flickered with frustration as he reviewed the latest reports. The humans were becoming more organized, their attacks more precise. They were no longer the disorganized rabble they had been at first. They've learned too much. Too quickly, Voreth muttered, his voice low with concern. We underestimated them, but we cannot afford to make that mistake again. He slammed a fist onto the control panel, sending a ripple through the walls. Prepare for the next phase. We will wipe them out, once and for all. But despite the Xerians' determination, the humans were not so easily defeated. The next attack came faster than expected. Alex and his team, along with several other resistance units, launched an assault on a key Xerian defense base. The attack was swift and well-coordinated. The humans had learned to move like shadows, using guerrilla tactics that confused the Xerians and made them doubt their own superiority. As Alex led his squad through the battle, a powerful feeling surged through him. He wasn't just fighting to stay alive anymore. He was fighting for something bigger, for the future of humanity, for the Earth, and for the chance to show the Xerians that they were not just a species to be wiped out. The battle raged for hours, and by the time it was over, the humans had achieved another incredible victory. The Xerians had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt, to fight with everything they had, even when faced with overwhelming odds. Dr. Hayes stood in the command center, her eyes focused on the monitors. It's working, she said quietly. Humanity is beginning to fight back like never before. The Resistance's success was not just a series of small victories, it was the beginning of something much larger. The Xerians, who had once thought that they would wipe out humanity without breaking a sweat, now faced an enemy that was not only fighting back, but fighting smarter. The humans had discovered their strength, and they had only just begun. Their survival instinct, their determination, and their ability to innovate had turned the tide. The Xerians had thought they could control the fate of Earth, but they had awakened something far more dangerous, a force that would not stop until they had reclaimed their world. The Xerians had underestimated humanity for far too long. Each time they thought they had wiped out the last of the human resistance, another wave of humans appeared, ready to strike back. The war had been raging for months, and though the Xerians were relentless, they began to feel the pressure. Their fleets were stretched thin, their forces scattered across the galaxy, and yet the humans kept coming. They fought not just for survival, but for something much more powerful, their right to exist. General Voreth, leader of the Xerian fleet, paced back and forth in his command center. He was no fool. He knew that humanity's resilience was not just a fluke, it was a force that could not be easily crushed. With each victory the humans claimed, the situation grew more dire for the Xerians. They had planned to wipe out the human race in one swift blow, but instead, they were now engaged in a full-scale war. Where are they getting this power? Vorith growled, his frustration evident. Every time we strike, they come back stronger. How is this possible? His advisors shuffled nervously, unable to answer. They had never faced an enemy like this before. The humans, once thought weak and unorganized, had become an unstoppable force. Back on Earth, the human resistance continued to grow stronger. Dr. Emily Hayes, the scientist who had unlocked the hidden potential within humanity, watched as the situation unfolded. She had always believed that humanity had the strength to overcome any obstacle, but now, as she observed the relentless attacks and counterattacks, she realized something much greater. Humanity had awakened something more than just power. It had awakened unity. People from all walks of life, from every corner of the world, had come together to fight. The divisions that once separated nations and cultures had been wiped away. Now it was no longer about individual nations. It was about the survival of humanity as a whole. Dr. Hayes and the rest of the resistance leaders had established a secret command center deep within the remains of a once bustling city. Here they worked around the clock, planning their next moves. The humans had learned a great deal from their battles with the Xerians. They had adapted quickly, learning how to fight not just with weapons, but with strategy, stealth, and ingenuity. We need to hit them where it hurts, Dr. Hayes said, her voice firm. The Xerians have grown too comfortable, too sure of themselves. It's time to show them that we can strike without warning. Alex, the young soldier who had led the successful assault on the Xerian battleship, stood by her side. He had become a symbol of humanity's strength, and his reputation had spread across the globe. He was more than just a soldier now. He was a leader. We've already taken down one of their ships. Now we need to hit their command center, Alex suggested. We've learned enough about their fleet to know that their command ship is the key to everything. If we can take it out, the rest of their forces will fall apart. Dr. Hayes nodded, her eyes filled with determination. Agreed. We've managed to strike at their smaller ships, but now it's time for the final blow. We'll need to be fast and precise, no mistakes. The resistance gathered their forces, preparing for what would be their most daring mission yet. Humanity's finest minds had worked together to create a new kind of weapon, one that would allow them to infiltrate the Xerian command ship undetected. It was a long shot, but the humans had no choice. If they could pull this off, it would be a turning point in the war. The plan was risky. The Xerian command ship was heavily guarded, and the Xerians themselves were well-trained and ruthless. But the humans had something that the Xerians could not anticipate: their ability to adapt quickly. They had learned from every battle, every loss, and every victory. They were no longer the same people who had cowered in fear at the start of the war. They were fighters, survivors, and they would do whatever it took to win. The attack began under the cover of darkness. The humans had developed a new type of stealth technology that allowed their ships to slip past the Xerian defenses unnoticed. As the human fleet approached the Xerian command ship, the tension was palpable. Alex, leading a team of elite soldiers, sat in the cockpit of a small, fast ship, his mind focused on the mission ahead. "We're almost there," Alex said, his voice calm despite the gravity of the situation. "Stay sharp, everyone. We have one shot at this." The team was silent as they flew closer to the Xerian ship. The ship loomed large in the distance, its massive structure floating silently in space. It was a symbol of the Xerians' power, a constant reminder of their superiority. But now, it would become their greatest weakness. "We're in position," Alex said, his eyes scanning the readouts on his console. "Prepare to board. Move quickly, and don't engage unless you have to." The team descended into the heart of the Xerian ship, using the advanced technology they had stolen from previous battles. They landed in a hidden bay, undetected by the ship's sensors. From there, they made their way deeper into the ship, following the path laid out by their intelligence. The Xerians were busy coordinating their defenses, unaware of the threat lurking in their midst. As they reached the command center, Alex's team encountered their first wave of Xerian soldiers. The battle was swift and intense, but the humans were prepared. They moved with precision, using their knowledge of the Xerians' tactics to outmaneuver them. The fight was not just about physical strength. It was about outsmarting the enemy, using their own technology against them. Minutes felt like hours as they fought their way toward the heart of the command center. The final confrontation was inevitable. Alex and his team faced off against General Vorith, the Xerian leader who had sworn to wipe out humanity. "I knew you would come," Vorith sneered, his alien eyes flashing with anger. "But you are too late. Your race is doomed." Alex stood, tall, his voice steady. "You're wrong. Humanity will never be defeated. We've fought for too long, and we won't stop until we've won." The battle between Alex and Vorith was fierce, but it was clear that humanity had the advantage. The Xerians, despite their strength and technology, could not match the determination that burned in the hearts of the human soldiers. In the end, it was the humans who emerged victorious. The Xerians' command center was destroyed, and with it, their ability to coordinate their forces. The humans had struck at the heart of the enemy's power, and now the Xerians were on the back foot. As the human fleet celebrated their success, Dr. Hayes stood at the command center, watching the victory unfold. It was a turning point in the war. The Xerians had underestimated humanity once again, and now they would pay the price. Humanity had proven that they were not just survivors. They were a force to be reckoned with. The Xerians had awakened a monster when they attacked Earth. Now, that monster was too dangerous to let live, and humanity was just getting started. The war between humanity and the Xerians had reached its peak. Earth, once shattered and scarred, had become the symbol of resistance. Each victory the humans claimed was not just a triumph on the battlefield, it was a message to the galaxy that humanity could not be destroyed. It had been through its darkest hour, and now it was stronger than ever. General Vorith, the leader of the Xerian fleet, was growing desperate. He paced back and forth in his command center, his thoughts a chaotic mess. The Xerians had been relentless in their attacks, yet each time they believed they had broken the humans, they were proven wrong. The humans had turned every defeat into a lesson, and with each victory, they grew bolder. "Where is the breaking point?" Vorith muttered under his breath. "Why won't they fall?" The Xerians had underestimated the human spirit. They had believed that their superior weapons and tactics would easily crush the humans, but they had failed to account for one thing: the unyielding will of the human race. And now, that will was beginning to break the Xerian Empire. On Earth, the situation was more intense than ever. Humanity's fleet had grown stronger, their tactics more refined. Each successful mission was a step closer to victory. But the final blow had not yet come. The Xerians still controlled vast stretches of space, and their fleet, though damaged, was still a threat. Dr. Emily Hayes, who had been at the heart of the human resistance, was now leading the final operation. It was a dangerous mission, one that would either ensure humanity's victory or cost them everything. The goal was simple: strike at the heart of the Xerian Empire and destroy their command center once and for all. If they succeeded, the Xerians would have no choice but to surrender. If they failed, Earth would face complete annihilation. Dr. Hayes stood before the gathered resistance leaders, her expression calm but determined. The weight of the mission was heavy, but she had never wavered in her belief that humanity could overcome any obstacle. "This is it," she said, her voice steady. "We've come this far and we're not going to stop now. This will be our final stand." Alex, the young soldier who had become a leader in the resistance, nodded in agreement. His face was serious, but there was no fear in his eyes. We've been fighting for this moment since the Xerians first attacked. Now, we take the fight to their doorstep. The plan was bold, but the humans had learned from their past encounters with the Xerians. They knew their enemies' weaknesses, and they knew how to exploit them. This time, they would not be caught off guard. The attack on the Xerian command center would come swiftly, and they would hit them where it hurt the most: their leadership. The fleet was ready. Thousands of ships, both military and civilian, had been outfitted for the assault. Fighters, bombers, and stealth ships all prepared to launch at once. It would be a coordinated attack on the Xerian home base, the final blow, that would cripple their power. For the first time in months, the humans felt a sense of unity and purpose. This wasn't just another battle, it was the end of a war. As the fleet set off, the tension was palpable. They were heading into the heart of enemy space, where the Xerians had established their last stronghold. This was no ordinary battle. It was the final chance to end the conflict. Everyone on board knew that they might not return, but that didn't matter. They were fighting for their future, for their families, for Earth. The journey to the Xerian stronghold took days, but time seemed to stretch on forever. The closer they got, the more the reality of the mission set in. Alex, who had been at the front of every attack, sat in the cockpit of his fighter, watching the stars streak by. His hands gripped the controls, but his mind was focused elsewhere. He thought of the people he had lost along the way, the friends who had fought beside him, and the families who had been torn apart by the war. He thought of Earth, still scarred, but standing tall. "We're almost there," his navigator said, snapping him back to reality. "Brace yourself." The fleet emerged from hyperspace, and the Xerian stronghold appeared before them. It was a massive, heavily defended structure built into a planet-sized asteroid. The Xerians had spared no expense in fortifying their home base, but they had no idea what was coming. The human fleet launched their first wave of attacks, bombers, and fighters cutting through the Xerian defenses with precision. The Xerians responded quickly, but they were unprepared for the scale of the human assault. Ships exploded in the distance, fire and debris filling the vacuum of space. The battle raged on, the sounds of destruction echoing through the void. In the heart of the battle, Alex led his team toward the Xerian command center. Their mission was clear: infiltrate the base, destroy the control systems, and eliminate the leadership. It was a suicide mission, but there was no turning back. As they approached the heavily guarded planet, the Xerians launched their final line of defense, massive warships designed to protect their home base at all costs. The human fleet clashed with the Xerian warships in a brutal exchange. Missiles flew, energy beams cut through the darkness, and the battle seemed to shake the very fabric of space itself. Alex and his team boarded their stealth ship, cloaked from the Xerian sensors. They maneuvered through the chaos, slipping past enemy fire as they made their way to the surface of the asteroid. Once there, they would have to infiltrate the command center and plant the explosives that would destroy the Xerian leadership once and for all. Inside the command center, General Vorth awaited them. He had known the humans would come. He had expected them. And yet, the sight of their assault still filled him with disbelief. The humans were not just a species of survivors, they were warriors. "You think you can defeat us?" Vorth sneered, as Alex and his team made their way into the heart of the command center. "We are the Xerians. We have conquered worlds, and you are nothing but a fleeting shadow." "We're not afraid of you," Alex replied, his voice unwavering. "We'll fight until the end." The battle inside the command center was fierce, but Alex and his team fought with everything they had. They had no choice. Humanity's future was on the line. They moved with precision, taking down Xerian guards and sabotaging the systems that powered the base. As the explosives were planted, Alex took one last look at the Xerian leader. "This is for Earth," he said, before setting the final charge. The explosion that followed was immense. The Xerian stronghold trembled, and the heart of their empire was shattered. The Xerians had lost their command center, their leadership, and their ability to continue the fight. In the wake of the explosion, the human fleet launched a final offensive against the remaining Xerian forces. With their command structure destroyed, the Xerians were scattered, their once great empire collapsing under the weight of humanity's fury. The war was over. Humanity had won. As the remnants of the Xerian fleet retreated, Dr. Hayes stood in the command center, watching the stars through the viewports. The cost had been high, but Earth had survived. Humanity had proven that they were not a race to be conquered. They were a race to be reckoned with. The battle was over. The war that had torn through Earth, threatened the very existence of humanity, and shattered the galaxy's peace had come to an end. Humanity had emerged victorious. The Xerians, once confident in their unchallenged power, now lay broken, scattered across the galaxy, their empire in ruins. They had underestimated the humans, and in the end, it was their own arrogance that led to their defeat. But the victory, though sweet, came with a heavy cost. Earth, once full of life and beauty, was now a fractured, scarred planet. The cities that had been bombed to dust were slowly beginning to rebuild, but the damage was deep. The scars of war were everywhere. Humanity had paid the price for their survival, but despite the destruction, there was hope. Earth was still standing, and so was humanity. Dr. Emily Hayes stood at the command center, looking out at the world. Through the large windows, the sky was clear, but the remnants of the battle still hovered above the planet. The debris from the destroyed Xerian ships drifted in the atmosphere like a reminder of the fight they had just won. But the calm, for now, was a welcome change. "We did it," Alex said, standing beside her. He had been a leader in the resistance, fighting on the front lines throughout the war. Now, with the war over, he was still a symbol of humanity's strength, a reminder of what had been accomplished. "Yes, we did," Dr. Hayes replied, her voice filled with both pride and sorrow. "But the price was high." Alex nodded. "We knew it would be. But we can rebuild. We have to." Dr. Hayes looked out at the horizon where the sun began to set. The world was still in ruins, but it was a world that still held life. It was a world where humanity had proven its strength. "We can rebuild," she said softly. "But we will never forget what it took to get here." As the days turned into weeks, the people of Earth came together to start the long process of recovery. The resistance had grown into a global movement. And now, with the war over, their job was to heal the planet. They worked together, rebuilding cities, restoring resources, and helping each other recover from the horrors they had endured. The world that had once been fractured by war and division was now united in the task of healing and rebuilding. Humanity was no longer divided by borders or nations. Now, they were one people, standing together in the face of their shared victory. Theo, leaders of the human resistance, including Dr. Hayes and Alex, helped guide the recovery efforts. They shared their knowledge, their resources, and their strength with the people, knowing that it would take time to restore everything that had been lost. But they also knew that they were not alone. The spirit of humanity had been awakened in ways they had never imagined, and with that spirit, they would rise again. The Xerians, meanwhile, had retreated to their home worlds, nursing their wounds. They had not yet fully realized the extent of their defeat, but they would soon. The human fleet, now strengthened by the victories they had earned, stood watch over the galaxy. Humanity had proven that they were not a species to be ignored, that they had the strength, the resilience, and the power to fight back against anyone who threatened their existence. Back on Earth, the leaders of the resistance gathered once more. The war was over, but the work was far from done. Dr. Hayes, Alex, and the others sat around a table, discussing the future of humanity. They knew that peace would not come easily, The galaxy had seen humanity's wrath, and many would fear them. But Dr. Hayes believed that humanity had earned its place in the universe, not through destruction, but through resilience, unity, and strength. "We've shown the galaxy that we're not a species to be wiped out," Dr. Hayes said, her voice filled with conviction. "We've proven that we will fight for our survival, for our future. Now it's time to move forward." Alex agreed. "We have the power to shape the future now, but we need to be careful. We can't let the mistakes of the past repeat themselves. We can't let our power turn into something destructive. We need to rebuild not just Earth, but our relationships with other species. We need to show the galaxy that we can be a force for good, not just for war." Dr. Hayes nodded. "It will take time, but we can do it. We will be the leaders of this new era, but we must lead with wisdom and compassion." As the days turned into months, the process of rebuilding continued. Humanity had not only survived the war, they had come out stronger, more united, and more determined than ever to make the galaxy a better place. They had learned from the mistakes of the past, and now they were determined to create a future that would honor the sacrifices of those who had fought and died for Earth's survival. Humanity had shown the galaxy that they were not just survivors. They were a force to be reckoned with. And with that power, they would shape the future, not just for Earth, but for all the species of the galaxy. But even as humanity looked toward the future, they knew that they would never forget the lessons of the past. The war had been won, but the journey was far from over. There would always be challenges, always be obstacles, but humanity had proven that no matter how difficult the battle, they would rise again. They would always rise. As the first new generation of humans, born into a world at peace, looked toward the stars, they knew that Earth's story was only just beginning. The galaxy was vast, and there were countless adventures ahead. The humans had shown the universe that they could not be ignored, and they were ready to take their place among the stars.